Hey guys, today we're going to be building the technical documentation page from FreeCodeCamp. This is part of the responsive web design certification. We're going to be building something very similar to this, which is it's just a menu, technical documentation menu, I guess, and it's going to jump in between things. And we're going to do minimal styling along with some CSS grid to go ahead and accomplish this task. You'll see my final product is pretty similar. I just did the bare minimum, the 5 points. You can obviously put more additional content in there if you want, but that's what I did. Let's go ahead and jump into it. I want to thank our sponsor for this video, Dev Mountain. You can check them out at devmountain.com. If you're interested in a coding bootcamp, I've had the pleasure of going to their Provo, Utah campus, where the housing that's included with the price of tuition so you can get up and go is just a block away. I've quite literally seen the apartments, walked to it, seen the campus. The campus is beautiful. So you can check them out if you're interested in multiple different types of coding bootcamps at devmountain.com. Alright, so as with any of the new FreeCodeCamp projects, we essentially have some user stories here. I wouldn't exactly say these are user stories in a traditional sense, but we're going to treat them as our requirements. These are really the tests to help maybe guide people who are just beginning and just learning. So you'll see here that we're going to be forking off this pin here, which is essentially going to give us some code. We're going to clean out the JavaScript section here. There's no JavaScript for this project. And we're going to clean out this comment here. Actually, let's just go ahead and fork this, and let me go ahead and change this so I know what I was doing. We'll go ahead and call this YouTube technical documentation, and hopefully I'll remember to put this in the description below. First thing we're going to do is really just knock out these tests, right? These tests, for the most part, are just some structural things that they want us to do for our technical documentation. You'll see right now we already have a couple that are there, and I'm actually going to pull up the FreeCodeCamp user stories like so that we're just not running this back and forth. So the first thing we want to do is create a main element. Remember, the main tag is it's typically to display where the majority of your content is going to go in your HTML. So there, and within there we're going to see a minimum of 5 sections. Again, I did the minimum, so what we're going to do is a section, and each one of those is going to have a class of main-section. And what you're seeing me do here is just some emit. So hit tab on here, and then it'll go and create those 5 after we put that times 5. And if it's just 1, we wouldn't put any multiplier there. But now we have those sections, and we'll go ahead and expand those out a little bit, expand those out a little bit, expand those out a little bit, expand those out a little bit. And this is just based off the user story 3. Each section should have a header with an element, that text that describes the topic of that section. So we'll go ahead and create a header. So I believe I did on mine introduction. And then we'll create another header, and in here I did JavaScript, and then let's go ahead and just close this a little bit, and we're not looking at the CSS yet. Zoom in just a little bit for everybody. So there's the JavaScript, and then we're going to do variables, and really the content here isn't the most important part, right? It's about just understanding and practicing some HTML and some CSS and CSS grid. That's the objective here at the end of the day. But all right, so we did that, and we can go ahead for the time being. We did a few things, run it, make sure everything's good. All right, cool. So the next one is the first element within the main section should be a header element that contains the text that describes the topic of that section. It is. That should be passing. I think it should be passing. Oh, yeah, so sometimes these tests bug out on me. I'm not quite sure why. But if you have that, usually it just helps to refresh the page. see here, header. Oh, you know why? It's because I forgot the header. Look at that. That will do it. All right. Go ahead and put that in there. Scope. Functions. Excellent. So now that we've done that, each section that with the main section, it's going to have an ID corresponding to the header contained within it. Now, what we're building is the sections of our documentation page. And the reason for that is so that we can reference them later. So, so the section that contains header JavaScript and Java should have JavaScript and Java. So each section. So now we're going to go ahead and give each one of these an ID. So this ID is going to be introduction. And then we're going to give an ID for each one of these sections. Now remember, IDs are unique identifiers, so that's why you need to have a unique name for them. Because if we're going to use these to reference so that our page does a local jump in the application, meaning that there's a local href, we're not changing the page, but we're going to jump using an href tag later on to that section, then we need to make sure that it is unique, which is why we're using an ID. Although you can, in theory, if you wanted to practice bad HTML, do that and not be punished too bad, but it'd break your stuff. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to have at least 10 paragraph elements. In my example that I did, I put 2 into introduction. All right. So below our header, we're gonna have a paragraph, and I'm gonna throw some text in there. This is just text that I copied from there, nothing I typed up for the most part. And go ahead and throw that in there. You know, you guys can obviously decide what text you want as well. And copy this text. We'll go ahead and create another paragraph. Oops, and I missed a J on that. Paste that in there. Cool. And then we go down to the JavaScript section, and I put a paragraph in there, and I put another paragraph in there. I probably put 2 paragraphs in each one of these is probably what I did, since it was 10 and we had 5 sections. So let's go ahead and copy that over. Just put in some content here, and then we'll put in some more content right here. All right, cool. And now we're going to create a paragraph for the variables, like so. Put that in there. Go ahead and create another one. And copy this text over. All right. Save the text. You know, right now it's looking like a whole jumbled thing of mess. Don't really worry about that quite yet. You know, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, what we're trying to do right now is just put in some content and get sort of the bones structured. Because at the end of the day, we could really structure this a couple different ways. This is just the way that FreeCodeCamp thinks is best and is there to help you out. So in our example right now, we're just going to go ahead and go along with it because we were using their platform, and we want to make sure we pass those tests. So almost there. And then I think the function code was something that I wrote. So go ahead and throw paragraph and a final paragraph in there. All right, so let's go ahead and add that last paragraph here. Control C, create a paragraph. Save, and I think so we're at 7 to 16 of the requirements. We need to add 5 LI items. I added it to the where did I add that? I added that to the, was it introduction? No, the JavaScript section. So let's go up to JavaScript. And this intro, we got it to that. So remember, we create ordered lists or unordered lists. I guess you could have made it ordered. I made it unordered with a UL. Then we have our LIs, and let's just go ahead times 5, since it said at least 5. And in here, I just put some keywords, variables, functions, control flow. Let's put promises, and the strange parts. All right. So now that we've done that, the next item we need to do is create a navbar. So remember that left side? We're going to make that with a navbar. Now the navbar is not going to be part of the main content. So not navbar, a nav with the class of navbar, like so. Excellent. Now the navbar is going to have one header for each element that's in there. So remember the header, and then we're going to times that by, was it 5, I believe? Is that right? Yeah. And, oh no, I'm sorry. It's going to have a header, which is then going to be like the JS documentation. And then within there, it's going to have 5 anchor tags, which are going to have a class of nav-link, and there's going to be 5 of those. Now, each one of those hrefs are going to have that local reference that is going to kick down to those IDs. So if we want when we click this anchor tag to go jump us to the introduction, all we would do is hashtag introduction. We're going to do the same thing for the other parts. So that's going to be hashtag JavaScript, hashtag variables. Oop, forgot the hashtag. Hashtag scope. And the hashtag functions. And then let's go add some text as well, right? So we need something to click. So this is going to be introduction. This will be JavaScript. This will be variables. And then this will be scope. And finally functions. All right, cool. So we have our nav created. Now we need a header element. Navbar should, all right, we already put that in there. We put in the, there should be one for every element. Header must have a navbar for any link. Each nav link corresponds to the header section. We did that. When I click on navbar element, page navigates to that. Okay, so I think minus the media query stuff, what is the issue that we're having here? The main section should contain at least 5 total elements. Oh, 5 code elements. Forgot about that. So we're going to add some code blocks in here. And we'll add, let's see here. Where did I put them? I put one, I forgot the code parts. So we're going to put that in between the UL and LI. And then in the code section, I put some content in it as well. I just put the hello greet function in there. So we'll add that in there, save that. And then we're going to go add another code. I'm just going to copy we're going to add 2 code sections to the variables. So scope variables right after the paragraphs here. So we're going to add 2 code sections there with some content. And we're going to add a code section to the next block. So we're at 3 right now. So that's going to be to the scope. And we're going to add 1 last code section, or 2 last codes. I guess I put 2 last code sections to right here. All right, so let's go ahead and run that, and we should get a few more, at least 1 more. And what's the next one that's saying that we don't have? Navbar with corresponding ID navbar. Did I use a class? Yes, I did. All right, save that, run it again. All right, so now all we have left are the 2 media queries, and the ID should always be left of the screen. Cool. So now that we're here, we've set up all the, all the general bootstrapped content. The only thing that I'm going to add to this is I was having an issue earlier in here where the because I was targeting the body, it'd be our large container around the navbar and main section, that I created a div here, and I just called this main-body. Not the best name. And we're gonna wrap this around main here. And the reason for this is I want to use this to be our grid container, our CSS grid, right? So now that we're done that, we are completely done with the HTML. Everything else we're going to be doing is in pure CSS. So let's go ahead and dive into that a little bit. So we created that div, that main body. So we can use the body class, or we can, you know, in case they for some reason are using main body and something else like in the body tag, I just made it a little bit more specific of a selector. Now we're going to make this a grid, so we have to give it the display grid. And what I want to do is I want to have a minimum of 300 pixels and then auto for the first column, which is going to be the nav bar on the left hand side. We're not going to be doing a mobile first approach to this. I did a desktop first approach, and then a 1FR, which is going to be the rest of the content essentially in the main content section. So as I mentioned, I want it to take up a minimum of 300 pixels and a maximum of whatever it needs. So that min value comes first, followed by auto, 1FR. Now I also want my grid to have a I also want to define my grid template areas, grid-template-areas. This is going to give us the ability to say what goes in that first column and what goes in the second column. So it's going to be nav bar for that first column, space, and for the second column, main content. Now we haven't defined what those are yet, but we will right now. So the first thing is a nav with a ID of navbar, in case for some reason navbar is a reserved word in CodePen. The ID is probably enough, we don't have to do that, but if we wanted a more specific selector, we're going to tell it that its grid area is that navbar that we've defined. So you see it's already sort of working as is. Now it doesn't look very nice, but it's there. Another thing we're going to add here is a position fixed. Now this will give us the ability where it's going to mess the grid up right now, but because we haven't defined the other one, but we essentially want that code to always be there. Now see, in desktop at least. So when we click it, we don't want it to have to scroll down or up. We always want it to be to the left side. That's what that position fix is for. Now let's go ahead and for the main doc, for the main content, go ahead and define that grid area real quick. And all we're going to do for that is do main hashtag main-doc, again in case they have something similar, but ID is probably good enough. And grid area is going to be the main content. Excellent. Now I'm not sure. Oh, I know. I think this is bleeding over. Why is that bleeding over? I don't know why that's bleeding over. We're going to fix it in a second. But now that we've defined main content, we can at the very least go ahead and give it a grid-gap. So a grid gap here will give all our grid items a little bit of room of 20 pixels. And of course we need a semicolon on this above. And now we'll have about a 20 pixel gap between these two. You see how that shifted to the left? Now these are all going to be block level elements. We're not going to have to worry about that in a second. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So within our nav bar, and notice how I'm going to be putting the nav items near the nav items, and the because you want your CSS to be as close near your items, near related CSS selectors. So in this case, you know, we're targeting the anchor tags in the nav bar. What do we want them to be? Well, we want them to be their own block level element. We don't want them to be inline, so they stack. Another thing we want is, you know, let's add some styles. So we're going to put a 1 pixel solid black border on it. Cool. We're also going to give it some padding because they're a little close, of maybe 5 pixels. All right. and then we're going to give it a margin of about 10 pixels and 0 on the right to left, because we want it to be lined up with the JS docs. I think that's fine. Now after that, we're going to go ahead and give it some text decoration so that they don't really look like links, and we're just going to go ahead and unassign that, and then we're going to set the color here to black. So although they are links in the traditional sense, they we really, you know, it doesn't need to be like that, I guess. What I'm trying to say is that you know what, I think we can maybe even lower this to 200 pixels. There's no reason for that to take up the whole thing. And 300 pixels is a bit much, but it can expand to be whatever. And it'll probably grow in just a second, because the next thing I want to do is I want these headings. Right now we can't really tell that this is a header or this is a header or whatnot. So what I'd like to do is let's go ahead and define our headers. Let's actually and we can do this after the main section, because header is going to be more of a universal thing. And we'll go ahead and set the font dash size to make it bigger of 1.5 EM, and then we'll go ahead and we'll give it a font dash weight of bold. And now we have some headers that are got a little bit more girth to them, if you want to think of it that way. Girth is kind of a strange word to use, but you guys get what I'm saying, I think. So now that we've done that, the last thing, or there's two last things I want to do. One is I want to go ahead and set the code blocks so that they look all right. So we can go ahead and target just the code level elements, and what we'll give it is a background color, so we can see that it's doing something different. And that'll give it a nice gray. We'll also go ahead and make those a block level display as well, so that they go all the way across and we're not going to have anything shifting into it. For the most part, all we used was block level elements, but it's better to have that than not. And then we're going to give it a padding of about 20 pixels so that it looks like an indented code block. And now we have our code block. So the last thing that we're going to need to do is handle the responsiveness. So right now you'll see that when our screen is very small, it goes side by side. What I actually want, and you know, maybe this is what you want, what I want is I want this to stack above it. And at that time, I'm now okay with it being on top of each other, not being on, like, not scrolling with it. Like here it's going to be fine, but I don't like this look. I want it to be on top. And so we're going to write a media query to help with that. So media queries allow us to write custom CSS for items for our application. And we're going to do @media, and it's a screen. And I'm going to set this this max width to 750 pixels. So if it's ever below 750 pixels, we're going to do some things. What are we going to do? Well, remember how we define that main body class? We're going to start off by changing the size of the grid template columns, where now all we want is 1FR, which means it's going to span the whole column. And we're going to go ahead and set the grid template columns the order we want that to be, or grid template areas, excuse me. And what we want is the first one to be our navbar, and our second one to be our main content. So the main content will be underneath the navbar. Now, if we have this like now, what's going to happen is you're going to see this stacked like this. So all we have to do is go and write some other CSS in when we're in that mobile. And this is how you just do innate mobile responsiveness, or native mobile responsiveness, more or less. We're just going to go ahead and target that and that position. We're just going to let it inherit, and that will handle that. Now let's go ahead and go full screen, full page mode. And so what we should get is a menu that sticks here, even though this jumps around. And then in a mobile view, if we go to mobile, that now we have a JavaScript, and it's going to jump between here. And that's it. If we go back and run the test, we should see that everything is good to go. And we're 16 of 16. We have our documentation. You can obviously throw more items in here and be a little bit more detailed about what's going on. But hopefully this helped you and explained some things. You got to see a little bit of maybe CSS grid and how you might use it in media queries and items like that. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching the video. If you're interested in any of my courses, I'd recommend checking out my JavaScript one or my 100 algorithm challenge one, which I think is probably my best course, to be honest with you. And don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, share, support me in whatever way that you can. It's appreciated. And I'll see you guys next video. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to check out my 100 algorithm challenge course. Get you prepped for those technical interviews to make sure you get nice offers. I actually just added some new content to it so you can get prepared for those technical phone screens as well. There's a link in the description to get it for just $9.99.